He said 15 days in Seattle for a merger, but the credit card alert screamed $5,000 for a lobster party in Cabo San Lucas. The moment that black card declined in the middle of a 5-star resort was the same moment I signed the papers selling the villa he loved. He thought he was king, but he forgot the queen holds the keys. My name is Elena Cross. I am 42 years old. For the past decade, I've been known simply as the wife of Julian Thorne, the celebrated CEO of Apex Horizon. But before Julian, I was just Elena, one of the most respected art appraisers in the country. My eye for authenticity was my gift, a gift I traded for the quiet, insulated life of a tech mogul's spouse. Our life was staged within the villa, a sprawling, historic estate in the Hudson Valley worth millions. It wasn't Julian's money that bought it. It was mine. Every restored beam, every pane of reclaimed glass, every brushstroke on the 19th century molding was paid for by the inheritance my parents left me. I had poured my soul into its restoration, turning a relic into a masterpiece, much like I had once tried to do with Julian. He stood in the grand foyer 3 days ago, smelling sharply of expensive cologne, the kind he reserved for board meetings. "Elena, darling," he'd said, adjusting his cuffs. "The Apex Horizon merger. It's finally happening. I have to be in Seattle for 15 days. Absolute tops." He stressed the importance of it, the secrecy. "It's critical. Elena, high-level security. Please, no calls, no texts unless it's a life-or-death emergency. I need total focus." I nodded, playing the supportive wife. But as he kissed my cheek, my gaze drifted to his luggage waiting by the door. Tucked between his polished leather dop kit and a single dark suit bag was a soft-sided weekender. I recognized it. It was his vacation bag, and as the butler carried it out, I caught a glimpse of what was inside, not the starched collars of business shirts, but the unmistakable bright linens and soft cottons of beachwear. Seattle in March is not known for its tropical climate. For 3 days, the house was silent. The villa breathed around me, its old timbers settling, the quiet so profound it was almost loud. I took my tea in the conservatory, cataloging my art collection, appreciating the stillness. The suspicion was a small, cold stone in my gut, but I did not give it voice. I was trained to look for proof, not to act on feeling. Then, the silence was broken, not by a call, but by the polite digital chime of an alert from my Centurion Concierge app, the service that manages my private assets. I glanced at my phone, expecting a notice about a market update or a dividend payment. The message glowed on the screen, stark and clinical. "Payment successful. $5,200 at the Azure Beach Club, Cabo San Lucas, Mexico." And beneath it, the service description, "VIP Lovers Party Package." I read the words twice. There was no panic, no sudden rush of tears or rage. The appraiser in me took over, the cold, analytical part of my brain that sees the flaw in the forgery, the lie beneath the varnish. I didn't reach for the phone to call him. I didn't throw a priceless vase against the wall. I sat perfectly still, the steam from my tea curling into the air. Calmly, I picked up my laptop. I accessed the private flight trackers I still had accounts for. There were no corporate jets from his company filed for Seattle, no commercial flights booked under his name to Washington State. But there was a record, 2 days prior, of a Gulfstream chartered from Teterboro to Cabo San Lucas. The suspicion was gone. In its place was a fact, as cold and hard as the marble floor beneath my feet. My husband, Julian Thorne, was not in Seattle closing a deal. He was in Mexico, using the supplementary black card I gave him, the one tied directly to my personal inheritance fund, to entertain a lover in a tropical paradise. He hadn't just lied. He had stolen from me to do it. My first instinct was not to scream. My second was not to call Julian and demand an explanation. My training, my entire life's discipline, was to gather facts. A hysterical phone call would only give him time to craft a better lie. I didn't call him. I called my private banker. "Good morning, David," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I need a complete, itemized transaction history for the supplementary accounts linked to my primary trust. Yes, all of them. Please go back 3 months." Within an hour, the encrypted files were in my inbox. The $5,200 charge from Cabo was the explosion, but the documents in front of me detailed the fuse. It had been burning for months. There were dozens of small, insidious charges. $400 at a lingerie boutique in Soho I've never entered, $600 at a high-end spa that specializes in body sculpting, a service I've never needed, a recurring charge for a private car service I didn't use, and jewelry, not million-dollar pieces that I would notice, but a steady drain $2,000 here, $5,000 there, from jewelers I didn't patronize. It was the pattern of a man buying trinkets for a mistress, all funded by my inheritance. The appraiser in me saw it clearly a forgery, built piece by piece over time, designed to look like the real thing until you examined it up close. I closed the file and made a second call. "Marcus, it's Elena. I apologize for the abrupt call. I need your professional services." Marcus and I went back 20 years, long before Julian. He was a shadow in the digital world, a former cybersecurity expert who now ran the most discreet private investigation firm in New York. He owed me a favor from a time when an art forgery case crossed paths with a data theft ring. "Elena." His voice was always calm. "What do you need?" "I have a name and a location, the Azure Beach Club, Cabo San Lucas. The primary guest is my husband, Julian Thorne. I need to know who is with him, and I need it yesterday." "Give me 30 minutes, he said, and hung up. He only needed 20. My phone buzzed with an incoming secure file. It contained a name, Sienna. Just Sienna. 24 years old. Her occupation was listed as lifestyle influencer. The file included her social media handles, all of which, I noted with a cold spark of interest, had me preemptively blocked. She's not stupid, but she's sloppy. Marcus's text message read, "She's traveling with him." But she set up a close friends list on Instagram that one of my assets is on. She's posting live. "Sending you the dump now." The images flooded my phone. Sienna, 24 and glowing with spray tan, posing in a bikini on the balcony of a suite that I knew cost $10,000 a night. Sienna sipping champagne, the bottle identical to the one Julian kept for special occasions. And then, the final picture. A close-up of her wrist, draped artfully over Julian's forearm, which was identifiable by his university signet ring. Around her delicate wrist was a watch, a rose gold Patek Philippe Nautilus, the same Patek Philippe that Julian had, 2 months ago, claimed was lost during a golf trip. He had mourned its loss for weeks, manufactured a performance of such profound sadness that I had almost bought him a replacement. A feeling washed over me, so potent it left a metallic taste in my mouth. It wasn't the searing heat of jealousy. I was surprised to find I felt almost none. It was the icy, sterile revulsion of disgust. It was the feeling of finding a beautiful sculpture is actually riddled with termites. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a long con, a calculated insult to my intelligence. He hadn't just betrayed our 12 years of marriage. He had viewed me as a resource, an open vault, a fool he could placate with boardroom stories while he used my family's legacy to fund his sordid little midlife crisis. I looked at the picture of the watch. I thought of the villa. I thought of the name Cross that I had so foolishly traded for Thorne. He thought I was a curator, a gentlewoman who lived among beautiful dead things. He forgot that my entire career was built on one skill separating the priceless from the fake and discarding the fakes without mercy. I closed the laptop. The decision was made. Divorce was too simple. It was too clean. No. This required a different approach. This required a professional appraisal. Julian Thorne had based his entire corporate facade, his entire lifestyle, on his access to my wealth. I decided, in that quiet conservatory, that I would not just divorce him. I would dismantle him, piece by piece, starting with the very foundation he stood on. I would gut his finances, just as he had tried to gut my trust. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. The cold, clear certainty that had settled over me was a shield. My next call was to my personal attorney, the one who handled my family's estate, not the corporate lawyers Julian preferred. "Michael, good afternoon. It's Elena Thorne," I said, my voice crisp. "I need you to draw up divorce papers. Julian and I. Yes, irreconcilable differences will suffice for now, but I want the strongest possible protection for my personal trust and all assets derived from the cross inheritance. I want it ironclad." Michael, ever the professional, didn't ask questions about the why, only the how. "I'll start immediately. Elena, I'll need a retainer." "It's already being wired," I said. "Expect a package from my investigator. Marcus, within the hour. It should provide sufficient context. I want to be ready to file at a moment's notice." I hung up and immediately dialed my private banker again. David answered on the first ring. "David, I need to report a card lost and compromised," I said. "The supplementary Centurion card under Julian Thorne's name. Lost, Mrs. Thorne." "Stolen," I corrected, my voice dropping to a confidential, urgent tone. "I have reason to believe it's been stolen and is being used fraudulently as we speak. That charge in Mexico. It wasn't him. I need you to cancel that card immediately. Not just freeze it. Cancel it. Terminate its existence." "Of course, Elena. Right away." "And David," I added, letting a tremor of calculated worry enter my voice. "This has shaken me. I'm seeing other activity I don't recognize across our joint accounts. I suspect a major security breach. I need you to place an immediate administrative freeze on every single joint account I share with Mr. Thorne. All of them. Flag it for suspicion of financial fraud. No debits, no transfers, nothing out. Only I am authorized to lift this freeze in person." "Understood," he said, his voice serious. "I'm locking them down now." I imagined the digital gates slamming shut, the flow of my money, which he'd treated as his own, stopping as if a dam had just been erected. It was done in less than 5 minutes, thousands of miles away, in the blinding white sun of Cabo. Julian Thorne was at the peak of his performance. He was playing the part of the tech titan, the daddy his new companion admired. He and Sienna were laughing, the remnants of their $5,000 lobster feast littering the table. To impress her further, to show his limitless power, he signaled the waiter. "Another bottle of the Petrus," he ordered, feeling magnanimous. A $2,000 bottle of wine he couldn't pronounce properly. The waiter, smiling, returned minutes later. He did not bear a bottle, but a small, apologetic expression. He leaned in discreetly. "My apologies, sir. The card has been declined." Julian's smile faltered. "Declined. That's impossible. Run it again." "I have, sir. 3 times, the waiter said, his politeness unwavering. "It appears to be no longer active." A flush of anger crept up Julian's neck. "Fine." He was annoyed, embarrassed. He pulled out his wallet and produced another card, a joint checking account debit card. "Use this one." The waiter returned. "Also declined, sir." Now, a prickle of genuine fear. He tried a third, his corporate Amex. Declined. A fourth, his personal savings link. Declined. The blood drained from his face. Sienna, sensing the shift, put down her champagne. "Daddy, is something wrong?" Julian waved the waiter away, his voice suddenly tight, high-pitched. "There's a network error, a technical glitch." He grabbed his phone and strode away from the table, his swagger gone, replaced by a panicked, hurried pace. He dialed my number. Back in the Hudson Valley, I was sitting in the conservatory, the weak afternoon sun filtering through the glass. My tea had grown cold. My phone, resting face up on the antique mahogany table, suddenly vibrated, shattering the silence. The screen lit up. Husband, It rang once, twice, 3 times. I watched it, a dispassionate observer. It stopped, then immediately began ringing again. And again. The calls became frantic, one ending and the next beginning in a seamless loop of digital desperation. He was trapped. He was in a foreign country, in a 5-star resort, with a mountain of charges and a 24-year-old girl who expected a king, not a pauper. He was stranded on an island of his own making, and his lifeline had just been severed. I let it ring. After the 7th call, I calmly picked up the phone, silenced the ringer, and turned it face down on the table. I poured myself a fresh cup of hot tea, while Julian was, I imagined, cycling between rage and sheer terror in Mexico. I walked into his private study. It was the only room in the villa that I had allowed him to decorate, and it was a monument to his ego, dark mahogany, leather-bound books he'd never read, and faux modest awards for innovation displayed on the shelves. My target was behind the oversized, pretentious portrait of him affecting the pose of a railroad tycoon. I slid the heavy painting aside, revealing the flat gray face of a wall safe. He thought he was clever. He thought I was oblivious. I entered the code. His birthday, of course. Julian was a creature of profound narcissism. It never would have occurred to him to use a code that wasn't about himself. The safe clicked open with a soft, expensive sigh. Inside, there wasn't just the expected emergency cash and spare watches. Those were there, stacks of hundreds, but pushed to the side. The bulk of the space was taken by a set of hard drives and several manila folders marked Apex Horizon, Private. I took them to his large desk, the desk I had paid for, and sat in his leather chair. I started with the folders. What I had assumed was a successful, if opaque, tech company was revealed to be nothing more than a house of cards. The Seattle merger wasn't a triumph. It was a desperate, last-ditch lie. The balance sheets were horrifying. The company was drowning in debt. The profit and loss statements were awash in red ink. But the numbers didn't add up. There were massive, inexplicable cash infusions and equally massive, vague expenses funneled through offshore shell accounts. It wasn't just a failing company. It was a laundromat, a clumsy, failing money laundering operation. Julian wasn't a visionary CEO. He was a common and rather incompetent crook. This I could handle. This was just money, just business. I was already separating myself from it. But then I opened the last folder, the one tucked at the very bottom, marked Hudson Property. My blood did not run cold. It evaporated. It was a loan agreement, a second mortgage, not on a joint property, but on this house, on the villa, my home, the Dinardi masterpiece my grandfather had bought and my mother had cherished. The loan was for $800,000, taken out 6 months ago. The lender wasn't a reputable bank. It was a name I recognized from Marcus's seedier files, a predatory lending firm that specialized in high-interest, impossible-to-refinance loans for the desperate. And then I saw the signature line, Elena Cross Thorne. It was a forgery, a decent one, clearly practiced, but undeniably fake. He had faked my signature. He had leveraged my family's legacy, the one thing on this earth I truly owned, to plug the holes in his sinking criminal enterprise. I read the terms. The payment, in full, was due in 30 days, not 31, 30. If it defaulted, the lender had the immediate right to seize the asset. They wouldn't just foreclose. They would take it. They would take my house. The panic I hadn't felt about the cheating, the lies, or the theft finally clawed its way up my throat. He hadn't just put me at risk. He had put my entire history at risk. The $800,000 noose was tightening, and Julian was in Mexico with a 24-year-old, unable to even pay his hotel bill. He hadn't just been cheating on me. He had been actively trying to destroy me to save himself. The shock from the forgery documents was still vibrating in my hands when my phone rang again. It wasn't Julian. The caller ID read Beatrice Thorne, my mother-in-law. I let it ring twice, composing myself. then answered. I said nothing. "Elena, what have you done?" Her voice was a shrill instrument of pure, unadulterated accusation, cracking with feigned panic. "You've left him stranded. My boy. He's in another country, in trouble. And you cruel, cold woman, you cut him off." A small, dangerous piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "Beatrice, I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my voice a perfect, smooth mask of confusion. "Julian is in Seattle for a merger. He told me himself." There was a sputtering sound, then a snort of such profound derision it was almost comical. "Seattle, don't be a fool. Elena, he hasn't been in Seattle in days. He's in Mexico. That poor, sweet girl had to call me herself. Terrified. He can't pay the hotel. They're threatening to call the police. How could you humiliate him like that?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, letting her words hang in the air of the study. The room smelled of Julian's leather and deceit. "That poor, sweet girl," I repeated, my voice dropping. "Yes!" Beatrice shrieked, now fully committed to her attack, too enraged to see the trap. "Sienna, a lovely, lovely girl. He brought her to Sunday brunch 2 weeks ago when you were at your boring art auction. She's so appreciative, so full of life. Not like you. Elena, she's young. She's agreeable. She actually admires my son. She knows what he deserves." There it was. The second betrayal. The one that cemented the entire conspiracy. It wasn't just Julian's lie. It was a family plot. Beatrice, the woman who had cried poverty to me for 12 years, had met the mistress. She had approved. She was an accomplice, an enabler, cheering from the sidelines as her son bled my inheritance dry to fund his sordid affair. I felt a sudden, glacial calm. The anger I'd felt at the forgery solidified into something infinitely harder and more dangerous. While Beatrice continued to rant, "You were always too cold for him, too wrapped up in your dusty old paintings." I pulled up my private banking app on my laptop. I went to recurring payments. There it was. Beatrice Thorne, monthly pension, $3,000, sent on the first of every month like clockwork. A gift I had offered 5 years ago when she'd tearfully claimed her Social Security wasn't enough to cover her medical essentials. I cross-referenced the dates of my transfers with the bank statements from my joint account, the ones I'd pulled earlier. I saw the corresponding debits from Julian's accounts, the ones my money funded to high-end boutiques. But now, with Beatrice's complicity ringing in my ear, I looked closer. The gifts for Sienna were interspersed with payments to Beatrice. She wasn't just an accomplice, she was on the payroll. My monthly $3,000 wasn't for prescriptions. It was for her silence, for her complicity. It was for bags and spa days while she encouraged her son to defraud his wife. And you will turn those cards back on right now. Elena, you owe him that he is your husband. "Beatrice," I said. My voice was so quiet, so devoid of emotion, that it cut through her hysteria instantly. She stopped, mid-rant. "I am looking at the $3,000 monthly payment I have been generously gifting you for the past 60 months, I stated, as if appraising a piece of art. "I am also looking at the private retirement annuity I established for you last year, the one I have been funding with my own money as a gesture of goodwill." A new, different kind of panic entered her voice. A greedy, grasping fear. What about it, Elena? You wouldn't—" "I just have," I said. "I have canceled the recurring payment. I have also instructed my lawyer to dissolve the annuity trust. It is, after all, entirely discretionary." A sound like a dying bird came through the phone. "You can't." "That's my money. You promised." "I promised a mother-in-law, not a co-conspirator," I said, the words as sharp and cold as ice picks. "You seem to be in contact with your son and his agreeable friend. Tell Julian to ask Sienna to pay his hotel bill. And as for you, Beatrice, you will never see another cent of my money. Not one." I pressed end call, severing the connection. The silence in the study was absolute. The parasites had been identified. It was time to fumigate. My panic over the fraudulent loan was sharp but brief. It was an appraiser's panic. A problem had been identified, and now a solution was required. I had 30 days before that predatory lender could seize my family's legacy. 30 days to produce $800,000 in cash that I couldn't pull from the frozen joint accounts without alerting Julian to my full plan. Fighting Julian in court over the forgery would take months, maybe years. I didn't have years. I had days. I looked around the study, at the walls that held my childhood. Julian had poisoned this place. His greed, his lies, his forgery, they were in the plaster, under the floorboards. He had used my home to try and destroy me, and in that moment, I knew. You do not save a limb riddled with gangrene. You amputate. I made another call, this one to the most ruthless high-end real estate broker in New York. "Sloan, it's Elena Cross," I said. "Elena, to what do I owe the pleasure thinking of listing?" Her voice was like cut glass. "I am the villa, but there are conditions. It's an immediate sale, all cash, as is. I want it sold by the end of the week." A pause. "Elena, a property like that, it's a 9-month, maybe a year-long process. We need staging, marketing." "You need a buyer," I interrupted. "And I know exactly who. Call Alistair Sterling. You and I both know he's been trying to get this property for a decade. Tell him he can have it, all cash, for 15% below its last appraisal. 15%, Elena, that's millions lost. It's a fee for speed. Sloan, there's one more condition. He closes in 3 days, 72 hours. Take it or leave it." Sloan was a shark. She smelled the blood and the commission. "I'll call him." She called back in 10 minutes. "He's in. He's wiring the deposit now, but his condition is absolute. He wants possession in 3 days. That means everything. The furniture, the fixtures. He can have them," I said. "Elena, the custom Italian furniture, the antiques. He can have them," I repeated. My gaze drifted to the window, to the climate-controlled garage Julian had built for his babies, the contents of the wine cellar, too, and the car collection. There was a sharp intake of breath on Sloane's end. Julian's collection, his vintage Ferraris, his classic Porsches, was his identity. He loved them more than me, more than his company, probably more than Sienna. They were, in his mind, his, even though my money had paid for half of them. "Sold," I said, before she could ask again. "Everything but my personal art collection. I'll have that moved by tonight. Send the contracts. I'll sign them digitally." The next 48 hours were a blur of logistics, not emotion. I had my art crated and moved to a secure, climate-controlled storage facility in the city under my maiden name. I packed 3 suitcases with my clothes, my personal documents, and my mother's jewelry. I walked through the empty rooms, the ghosts of my family now mingling with the specter of Julian's betrayal. The e-signature flashed on my screen. Sale confirmed. The wire transfer hit my private, non-Julian-affiliated account an hour later. It was an astronomical sum, even with the 15% discount. My first act was a wire transfer of my own $800,000, plus interest, to the predatory lending firm, with the note, paid in full, terminating lien on Hudson property. The noose Julian had tied was gone. I was legally free of his most dangerous crime. The second act was to move the remaining balance, all of it, the millions left over. I didn't put it in a New York bank. I didn't put it anywhere in the United States. Following instructions from my lawyer, I wired the entire sum to a newly established, ironclad anonymous trust fund in Switzerland, a vault so deep and so dark Julian's name, or his lawyer's, could never penetrate it. On the 3rd day, at noon, a black SUV pulled up the long driveway. A man in a sharp suit, Alistair Sterling's estate manager, stepped out. I met him on the grand porch. I didn't invite him in. "Mrs. Thorne." "I'm Miss Cross." I said. I handed him the keys. All of them. The house keys, the garage keys, the wine cellar keys. It's all yours. Mr. Sterling sends his regards. He's bought a beautiful piece of history, I said. He should take better care of it than the last owner. I didn't look back. I got into the car I had waiting at the end of the drive, and as we pulled away, I watched the estate manager place a small, discreet digital lockbox on the front door, changing the codes, erasing the last 12 years of my life. The villa was no longer my home. It was just a house, and it was no longer my problem. I had moved myself into a suite at the St. Regis in Manhattan, a sterile, luxurious cocoon funded by my new, untouchable Swiss account. I was coordinating with my legal team, the walls of the room already covered in flowcharts. When my phone buzzed, it was not a text, but an Instagram direct message request. The profile picture was a predictable trout pout selfie. The username was Sienna. She had, as I expected, unblocked me. I opened the message. It was a novel, a hysterical, poorly punctuated epic of her victimhood. Mrs. Thorne, please, you have to believe me. I had no idea. He lied to me about everything. I swear on my life. He said you were already divorced. He said you were a cold monster who took all his money. He said this was his villa. I watched the typing bubble appear and disappear. He's a nightmare. He's not who he said he was. They took his passport, Elena, the hotel. He tried to leave, and they stopped him. Security came to the room. They said the bill is $15,000, and if he doesn't pay it by tonight, they are calling the police, the real police. So, the king was trapped in his own gilded cage. The VIP lover's package had a steep price. After all, he's trapped, she continued, and that means I'm trapped with him. He's blaming me. He's screaming, "Please, Mrs. Thorne, you seem like a good person. I just want to go home. I'm scared." I let her sit in that fear for exactly 5 minutes, the time it took for my room service coffee to arrive. Then I typed back, "What do you want, Sienna?" The response was immediate. The fear was replaced by the cold, hard efficiency of an opportunist. I have things he doesn't know I have. He's arrogant. He brags when he's drunk. I have recordings. Mrs. Thorne. My fingers stopped. Recordings of what? Of him. Bragging about how he signed your name. He called it a masterstroke. He laughed about forging your signature on that big loan, the $800,000 one. He said you were too stupid and wrapped up in your dusty art to ever notice. He called you his personal trust fund. I have it on audio. The air left my lungs, replaced by ice. It was one thing to find the evidence. It was another to hear the motive, the sheer, gleeful contempt. "There's more," she messaged. He was showing off, trying to prove how much of a boss he was. He showed me the texts he sent to his accountant, how to cook the books for Apex Horizon, how to hide the money offshore so the IRS pigs couldn't find it. I took screenshots. I have everything. It's all on my phone. This girl, this 24-year-old lifestyle influencer, had just handed me the criminal case that would finalize my husband's destruction. "Get me a ticket home," she wrote. "Just a one-way flight to Los Angeles. That's all I want. I'll send you everything right now. You can save yourself, and I can just disappear. Please." I went to an airline website. A last-minute one-way flight in economy from Cabo to LAX was $350. I replied, "I will wire you exactly $350, not a cent more. Send the files. Once I have verified they are legitimate, the money will appear in your account." I added, "This is charity, not a negotiation." A link appeared in my inbox, a compressed file. I downloaded it. I listened to the first 30 seconds of an audio file. I heard Julian's voice, slurred and arrogant. "Total idiot. She's so busy appraising paintings. I could sign her life away, and she'd thank me for it." I opened a screenshot, a text to Apex Act. "Move the surplus to the Cayman account before filing. Burn the ledger." I closed the file, sent it to a new, encrypted hard drive, and made a copy for my lawyer. Then, I transferred the $350 to the account she'd provided, with the memo, "Service rendered." I didn't need to guess what happened next. I knew Sienna. I knew her type. She would have the money in her account, a backpack packed, and be out the service entrance of that hotel within 10 minutes. I pictured Julian, finally cooling down, realizing the room was too quiet. I pictured him searching the suite, then the pool, his minor annoyance turning to raw animal panic as he realized his agreeable young lover had fled, taking his last shred of hope with her. He was now alone, in a foreign country, with no money, no passport, and a $15,000 bill that was about to bring the police to his door. It took Julian 5 days. 5 agonizing, humiliating days. I was later told by Marcus's contacts for him to scrape together enough money. He had to call friends, old college roommates, and minor executives at his sham company, begging for personal loans, weeping about a financial systems error. He finally managed to get just enough wired to him to pay the $15,000 hotel bill which they had, of course, held his passport to secure and to buy a single, one-way ticket in coach. He landed at JFK 5 days after his vacation was supposed to have ended, not as the returning titan of industry, but as a haggard, unwashed refugee from his own life, smelling of stale booze and pure, unadulterated fury. He didn't come back contrite. He didn't come back broken. He came back homicidal. He was not a man who had learned a lesson. He was a bully who had been embarrassed, and he was coming to find the person responsible. Me. His plan, I'm certain, was simple: get home, find me, beat me into submission if he had to, and force me to sign over everything. My phone buzzed as he must have been standing in the taxi line, his rage simmering under the fluorescent lights of the terminal. The text message was exactly what I expected. You are dead. You hear me. Elena dead. You think you can humiliate me. You think this is a game I am coming home. I am going to take everything from you, and I will throw you out on the street with nothing. You will sign everything. You are finished. I read the words without a tremor. He was so predictable, this man. His anger was a blunt instrument, and he had no idea I was wielding a scalpel. I let him sit in that taxi for 20 minutes, stewing in his own filth and fury, imagining his triumphant, violent return. Then, I texted him back. I sent him only 2 things. The first was the address to a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The second was a single line of text. Come here to sign the divorce papers. Julian. If you sign, I will consider unfreezing the accounts. It was the perfect bait. His rage wanted to come to the house, but his greed, his desperate, clawing need for the money I had cut off, would lead him to the address I sent. But I knew him. He wouldn't come to me first. He would have to go to his castle. He would have to reestablish his dominance, to stand on his land before confronting me. He would tell the taxi driver to go to the Hudson Valley. I knew the exact moment he would have arrived, just as the sun was setting, casting long, cold shadows across the lawns. He would have stormed up to the massive iron gates, jamming his key into the lock. It would not turn. He would have tried again, his brute force meeting the new, reinforced steel of Alistair Sterling's security. He would have hammered on the gate, screaming my name, screaming for his butler, for his staff, for anyone. And then, a man he had never seen before, in the crisp, dark uniform of a private security firm, would have emerged from the new guardhouse. Can I help you, sir? This is my house, Julian would have roared, his face purple. I am Julian Thorne, open this gate. The guard, polite, professional, and completely unmoved, would have consulted his data pad. I'm sorry, sir. This is the private residence of Mr. Alistair Sterling. There is no Mr. Thorne on the access list. You are trespassing. I must ask you to leave the premises immediately. Sterling. What are you talking about? This is my house, my wife. Elena. Sir, This property was sold. If you do not remove yourself from the gate, I will be forced to call the police." I can see him, standing there in the twilight, his world physically, undeniably dissolving, the stone walls of his fortress, the long, winding drive, the garage with his priceless cars, all of it, gone, stolen, sold. He would have stood there, struck absolutely dumb, the threats dying in his throat. His castle had vanished. He was a king with no kingdom, standing on a patch of gravel he no longer owned. Then he would remember. The rage, now mixed with a terrifying cold panic, would surge back. He had one last place to go, one last thread. My text message, the address in Manhattan. He would have scrambled back into the taxi, a wild, cornered animal, screaming the address at the driver, his mind completely unhinged, racing toward the only person left to blame. He was coming to me. The conference room was on the 50th floor, all glass and steel, overlooking Central Park. I had been watching the elevator bank. When the doors opened, he didn't walk out. He exploded, a whirlwind of 5-day-old stubble, rancid sweat, and pure, undiluted malice. The receptionist didn't even have time to scream before he slammed through the glass doors of the conference room. "Alina!" he bellowed, his voice a raw, broken thing. He saw me. He didn't see my lawyer, Michael. He didn't see the 2 broad-shouldered men in suits standing discreetly in the corners, men I had hired for this exact moment. He only saw me, sitting at the head of a 20-foot polished granite table, perfectly coiffed, wearing a severe blood-red dress. He lunged. It was an animalistic, guttural charge, his hands clawed, aiming for my throat. "You bitch, you'll pay." He made it 2 feet before the bodyguards converged. They didn't hit him. They were professionals. They simply absorbed his momentum, caught his arms, and pinned him, his face twisting, his expensive but now filthy suit jacket ripping at the seam. They held him upright, a struggling, pathetic marionette of his former self. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. "Julian, you look dreadful." Seated to my right was Michael, my lawyer, calmly arranging his papers. Seated to my left was a quiet, unassuming man in a polyester suit who had introduced himself to me an hour earlier as Mr. Davies from the Internal Revenue Service. He had been very interested in the anonymous tip he'd received, the one with all of Sienna's audio files and screenshots. He was just observing, for now. "My house," Julian spat, rattling in the guard's grip. "Where is my house, Elena? What did you do? You can't sell it. You can't? It's our house. You need my signature. I'll have you arrested. I'll... Please, let him go," I said to the guards. "I think he'll behave." They looked at me, then at Michael, who nodded. They released his arms. Julian stumbled, breathing hard, and collapsed into the chair opposite me, a bull who had found himself in a slaughterhouse. "You're right, Julian," I said, my voice resonating calmly in the silent room. "I couldn't sell our house, but I could sell my house, the house my inheritance paid for, the house my name was solely on the deed for, the house you tried to steal." I pushed a single document across the polished granite. It slid perfectly, stopping right in front of him. He stared at it, his eyes bloodshot and confused. "What is this?" "It's a loan agreement," I said. "A second mortgage, to be precise, for $800,000, from a rather unsavory lender. It was you who didn't need my signature. Wasn't it?" He saw the signature line. He saw the clumsy forgery of my name. The last of the blood drained from his face. He finally understood. "This," Michael said, leaning forward, his voice cutting through the air like a surgeon's blade, "is a document of criminal fraud. Mr. Thorne, the moment you forged Ms. Cross's signature to leverage her private asset, you nullified any and all spousal claims you might have had. You didn't just commit a crime, you voided your contract. Ms. Cross was made aware of this debt, which was 30 days from defaulting. Michael continued, at which point that lender would have seized the property. Your property, no. Her property. She acted swiftly and legally to protect her asset from your criminal enterprise. She sold the house to pay the debt you incurred. He paused, letting the words sink in. Legally. She has just saved you from an immediate charge of bank fraud, though I wouldn't count on that lasting. Practically, Mr. Thorne, you are left with nothing. The villa is gone. The contents are gone. And since your name was never on the original deed, you have absolutely no claim to the proceeds of the sale, which, by the way, are already secured in an offshore trust that you will never touch. Julian's eyes darted from me to Michael, and finally to the quiet, unassuming man in the cheap suit to my left, who was watching him with the mild, patient interest of a biologist studying a specimen. He opened his mouth. No sound came out. He had no house. He had no money. And he was, at this very moment, sitting in a room with a federal agent, having just been proven a forger and a thief. He was no longer a king. He was just a criminal. The arrogance vanished. In its place, a new performance began, the most pathetic forgery of all. Julian, the titan of industry, the king of his imaginary castle, crumpled. He slid from the chair, his knees hitting the polished granite with a wet, heavy sound. He was crying, thick, ugly, choking sobs. "Elena, please!" He wept, crawling, actually crawling, the few feet toward me. He didn't dare touch me. The guards were too close. "Baby, please, listen to me. It was the pressure, the company, the merger. It was all falling apart. I never meant to hurt you. I swear." He looked up, his face a grotesque mask of fake contrition. "It was her Sienna. She's a professional, Elena. She manipulated me. She seduced me. She cornered me. I was weak. But it's you, Elena. It has always, always been you. 12 years. Think of our 12 years, our life. Don't let one stupid mistake destroy everything we built." I looked down at him, this weeping man at my feet, and I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, just the cold, clean finality of an appraisal. 12 years, I repeated, my voice quiet, cutting through his sobs. You enjoyed 15 days of pleasure in Cabo. Julian, in doing so, you forced me to discover the truth of my 12 years. 12 years of being your bank, your cover, your personal trust fund. You think this is about Sienna. This is about your contempt for me, my freedom, my peace of mind. It is all worth infinitely more than your tears. I stood up, as if this were a signal. The glass door to the conference room opened. Mr. Davies from the IRS walked in, followed by 2 men I had not met, but whose sharp suits and demeanor screamed federal law enforcement. They had been waiting in the next room, just as my lawyer had arranged. "Julian Thorne," Mr. Davies said, his mild tone gone, replaced by the full, cold weight of federal authority. One of the other men stepped forward. "Julian Thorne," the man said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft." Mr. Davies stepped beside him. "And the Internal Revenue Service has a warrant for your arrest for multiple counts of felony tax evasion." Julian's head snapped up. No, you can't." "She did this. It's all her. She set me up, Elena. You bitch, you'll pay for this." He tried to scramble to his feet, to lunge at me one last time, but the agents were on him. They hauled him up, spun him around, and forced his arms behind his back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs was the final punctuation mark. The sound of his ruin, the realization that he was truly, finally finished, broke the last of his composure. He became a wild animal, thrashing in the trap. You ungrateful whore!" He screamed at me, his face purple. "You'll rot, you and my mother. You hear me. This is her fault. Beatrice, it's all her fault. He was still screaming, a litany of curses against me, against his mother, against Sienna, against the world, as they dragged him, shoeless and broken, out of the conference room and toward the elevator. The silence he left behind was profound. The consequences were not just his. Beatrice, cut off from my money and with her son's empire revealed as a fraud, was forced to sell her small apartment to contribute to his legal fees. It wasn't enough. The last I heard, she was in a state-run nursing home. Sienna, exposed in the media frenzy, her screenshots and audio files becoming public record, was immediately dropped by all her brands. She wasn't just canceled, she was annihilated, a digital ghost. I walked out of that skyscraper alone. I stepped onto the street, into the sharp, cold, beautiful air of New York. I took a deep breath. It was the first clean breath I had taken in 12 years. I was no longer Mrs. Thorne. I stopped at the curb, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number in Paris. "Bonjour, Antoine," I said, a smile I hadn't felt in a decade spreading across my face. "This is Elena Cross. Yes, Cross. It has been a long time. I am ready to get back in the market, and I have significant capital to invest immediately." I ended the call, slipping the phone into my coat. A taxi pulled to the curb. I got in, but not to go to a hotel. I was going to the airport. I was finally taking a trip that was all for me. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give that hype button a smash so this story can be heard by more people who need it.